It is 2 a.m. in New York, 7 in London, and 3 on a Thursday afternoon here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I'm Moon Geun-hye. We continue our special coverage on the sinking of a ferry off Korea's southwestern coast. As of now, we have confirmed it has been more than 24 hours since the first distress call, and it's been confirmed of 9 deaths and 287 others remain unaccounted for. Now, the Ministry of Safety is giving a briefing right now as we speak, and we will later on connect with our correspondent there. But first, let's go over to our Park Ji-won at the News Center for further details on this incident. Now, Ji-won, there was some fresh hope here in the nation earlier this morning when it was revealed that a series of text messages sent by survivors on the ferry arrived late last night. Those hopes have been tamped down a little bit, haven't they?
Yes, Kanyang, at around midnight last night, some 15 hours after the ship started listing, the messages said that they were alive, which did raise hopes that more survivors might be found. But we must note that there is a strong possibility these messages were sent earlier than that and just delivered at a later time. And the authorities are also looking into whether text messages were in fact sent by survivors inside the boat.
Right, we continue to look for any signs of hope in this disaster. Another has emerged today with talks about a possible air pocket that survivors may be using to stay alive. Tell us about that.
Yes, Kanyang, experts point out that the vessel has not yet completely sunk, as we can see on the tip of the ferry still above the surface, which means there could be a giant air pocket inside, an air pocket in which survivors could be using to stay alive. And local media here reports that talking about a case out of Nigeria last year where a fisherman survived for 60 hours underwater by using such an air pocket until he was safely rescued. So families of survivors all hope and wish that such a miracle might unfold here in the nation as well.
We are all, of course, hoping for such a miracle at this point. Now, Ji-won, with regards to the search efforts, authorities have started pumping oxygen into the hull of the capsized ferry. Tell us what they're trying to do here.
Yes, they are trying to provide air to anyone who may be alive in the ferry. The Coast Guard began pumping oxygen into the vessel at 12:30 this afternoon local time, about 2.5 hours ago, to help increase their chances of finding survivors before they lift the ship off at side. However, heavy rain and gusts of wind hampered search efforts throughout the morning.
So the weather continues to be a hindrance here. Jindo, we have to note that there is a lot of criticism about the lack of direction and decision-making in hours directly after the accident.
Yes, unfortunately, human error is being blamed for the fact that so many people are trapped inside the listing ship. We've heard reports that the passengers were told to remain where they were when the ship first encountered trouble, which runs counter to what safety experts advise people to do in such situations. They should have headed for open air. Also, there are reports that the captain of the ferry, identified as 60-year-old Lee Jun-seok, was one of the first to jump into a lifeboat, abandoning the sinking ship and hundreds of passengers. Experts say that it's absolutely unacceptable that the captain, who should have been remained on board giving directions, abandoned ship along with other crew who also bailed out early. The captain spoke to investigators this morning that he was truly sorry for the passengers and the victims' families. And it's also been pointed out that the ferry of this size carries about 60 lifeboats on board. Well, and this is mandated by the law. However, from the footage released of the rescue operations, only one such rescue boat was spotted, meaning the other 59 boats had not even been deployed. Experts think this is all because of the lack of preparedness and training, which all boils down to human error.
Now, Ji-won, we still don't know what caused the ship to capsize. There is speculation that the ferry might have hit a submerged reef or rocks, or that it may have made a swift turn for some reason. What do we know about what may have happened?
The Coast Guard has released provisional findings on what caused the ferry to sink. They say there was an abrupt change in the ship's course, and this could have caused it to list. Well, due to this, about 180 vehicles and 1,000 tons of cargo on board to ship to one site abruptly, ultimately leading the ship to capsize very quickly. Well, this again is a provisional finding, and it's important to repeat that as the investigation into what happened continues. And
well, there are certainly a lot of questions to be answered. Right now, we're simply hoping that search and rescue teams find survivors in what really has turned into one of the worst disasters that this country has seen in a very long time. Thank you, Ji-won, for that report. The exact cause of this accident is yet unknown, but there is plenty of speculation on how this 6,800-ton ferry, the second biggest of its kind operating in Korea, went under in less than just 2 hours. Let's try getting a better sense of the situation down in Jindo, what might have caused this huge ferry to sink, and the terrain and rescue teams are dealing with there in Korea's southwestern coast. For that, Park Geun-hye joins us live on the phone. He's a professor of ship and offshore structural mechanics at Busan National University. Thank you so much for joining us, Professor Park. Professor, what could have possibly caused this massive ferry to capsize and so quickly as well? I mean, we hear that this is very uncommon.
Okay, thank you for your invitation. First of all, I'd like to give my sincere condolence to family and friends of people who met at this accident. I'm very sorry about this. Actually, it is challenging to find out, the credible scenarios for this sinking. But before that, I think that it is important to look at what we have already found. That's actually sinking. I would say capsizing followed by sinking. Okay, this is what we have already found. Then now, why? What the causes will be for capsizing? I think that there are two possibilities. One is unintended accidental flooding. This can lead to capsizing. And the other one is insufficient stability. This will also be able to lead to capsizing. Unintended accidental flooding, basically insufficient stability can be caused by design error, that's one typical reason. The other one is ballast water management error. Some experts are now talking about the sudden change of ship course or path. If this was really happening with insufficient stability, then capsizing will probably happen. So this is still a possibility. But I believe that one more possibility is due to unintended accidental flooding. This unintended accidental flooding can be caused by structural damage with some holes. Four possibilities are relevant for the structural damage with holes. One is grounding and collision, explosion, and corrosion. I think that grounding will be the most possible for causing structural damage. So in this sense, I like to actually say that the most possible scenario will be first grounding, followed by structural damage with holes, followed by unintended accidental flooding, followed by capsizing, and followed by sinking. I'm saying is that this accident was really taking place by this scenario. I'm saying that this is most possible scenario.
Right. Definitely all are about speculations at this point. Professor Park, let me ask you something that's being speculated widely by the parents of those students, those with loved ones on the ship. They're talking a great deal about air pockets, and they hope that there are air pockets on this vessel, which could prove to be critical for the survival of their loved ones. What are the chances of passengers finding air pockets on a vessel like this in this kind of situation?
When you look at the ship, the sunken ship, and actually the stern part is already actually fully flooded, and you can see bow area is still actually having some buoyancy, meaning that there must be some air pocket in bow area. Therefore, there must be some chances that there must be some survivors. However, my personal idea is that unfortunately the possibility is very, very small. But if there is any cabin with the air pocket, there must be some actually possibility that there are some survivors yet.
Right. Well, time is of the essence here, it seems, and authorities are pumping in oxygen into the cabin as well, so we will hope for the very best. Now, one last question before we let you go. As we all try to make sense out of this accident, what caused this accident, is there anything to indicate that there was a lapse in inspection of this vessel and that it didn't meet safety standards?
Yes, well, firstly, I think that this is kind of human error, and I believe that there are a lot of things that we have to do to resolve this issue by improving safety and minimizing hazards.
All right, thank you for your time, Professor. We're looking forward to some very good news from this truly, truly heartbreaking incident. That was Professor Park Geun-hye, Professor of Ship and Offshore Structural Mechanics at Busan National University. Now, let's continue our coverage on the ferry sinking off Korea's southwestern coast. The major rescue operations continues on this Thursday afternoon, more than 24 hours after the first dispel or signal came from the ship, and more than 280, in fact 287 people still remain unaccounted for, with 9 confirmed dead. Now, most on board the Seoul ferry were teenagers, high school students in fact, on their way to Jeju Island on a field trip. Let's go straight to our Connie Kim, who is standing by at the Emergency Management Center that's been set up to deal with this tragic incident. Connie, what do we know so far?
Yes, unfortunately, we don't have any news over the number of survivors. The confirmed death toll currently stands at 9, 5 of them being high school students. Now, the Ministry of Security and Public Administration has confirmed that 5 foreigners were on board. 2 Filipinos, both in their 40s, are confirmed to have been rescued. The whereabouts of the 3 other foreign passengers are unknown, including an 18-year-old Russian student and 2 Chinese nationals of Korean descent in their 30s. According to a press briefing led by the Securities Minister this morning, 179 people have so far been rescued from the ferry. 101 of them are currently being treated in 8 different hospitals, 5 in critical condition. Now, there were conflicting numbers yesterday about the total number of people on board the ship when it went down, and that number has now been fixed at 475.
Well, a lot of confusion here, but one thing is for sure, the whole nation wants everyone to be safe and sound. The search and rescue efforts continue. This is a massive operation. Tell us just how large it is.
Well, an official from the Coast Guard has recently announced that more than 500 scuba divers are on the scene, along with 103 ships and 29 aircraft, all actively searching for survivors. 3 civilian scuba divers are also in the search, along with some 30 civilian workers also on the scene. A cooperative search is being led by the Korean Navy and the Coast Guard, but they are battling different conditions. Fast tidal currents and low visibility underwater are hampering efforts. There are 3 cranes currently on their way to Jindo, and 1 departed Wednesday night, and all 3 cranes are expected to arrive by tomorrow. They'll work in tandem to lift the 6,800-ton ferry out of the water.
And we are all waiting anxiously for updates from the government. How are the government officials helping with the search?
Well, Prime Minister Chung Eung-won held a cabinet meeting this morning calling for all related ministries to work in speed and to speed up the rescue operations. The Securities Ministry has sent 39 of its officials down to the area to help out in various ways, while the presidential office of Cheongwade canceled all scheduled meetings this morning.
We will, of course, continue to monitor the developments in the search and rescue efforts while continuing to hope for the very best in this very difficult time. Our Connie Kim reporting live from the Emergency Disaster Center in Seoul. Meanwhile, President Park Geun-hye visited the site of the search and rescue operations off the coast of Korea's southwestern Jindo this Thursday afternoon. She inspected the area and was briefed on the ongoing rescue efforts carried out by the military and Coast Guard. The president urged them to mobilize all their manpower and equipment to rescue as many of the missing as possible. On Wednesday, President Park visited the government's Emergency Management Center in Seoul to stress that saving each and every life was utmost priority. At this point, it's speculation and even more speculation. Something that is being discussed heavily, however, is that this terrible incident could have been made worse as passengers on board the ill-fated ferry were told numerous times through an onboard announcement to stay put and not attempt to jump into the sea. It was only after an hour that a final announcement was made for everyone to get off, but by then it could have been too late for some. Our Son Jung-in has more.
It's been reported that when the accident occurred, the onboard announcement to the passengers was to stay where they were without giving any specific directions. The same announcement was known to have been heard repeatedly for 1 hour before they finally told all the passengers to jump into the sea with their life vests on as the ferry was going to sink. Many say the delayed warning to get off the ferry could have caused a bigger tragedy as many passengers heeded instructions and stayed in their rooms and were later unable to escape as the vessel went down.
A female voice informed us of the situation through a speaker. She said the rescue workers would come soon and she told us to stay put.
The Seoul is one of the biggest ferries in Korea and most of the equipment is electric, including the doors and gates inside. Some experts speculate the generator may have gone off when the ferry began to tilt to the left.
It's highly likely the power cut off. As the ferry tilted, there could have been a total blackout, meaning doors would not open.
Even if the doors were open, the steep incline of the floors may have made escape much more difficult for people trapped inside.
Many people were screaming as the floors inclined and all the equipment and people slid down.
The worst scenario is that if there are still people trapped in the cabin, there won't be enough air for them to breathe. Everyone is praying with all their hearts that this won't be the case and that all those unaccounted for will be rescued safely. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
Now, search and rescue operations continue, and to navigate us through this tragic crisis, we are joined live once again in the studio by Dr. Kim Byung-ju. He is ARIRANG's longtime regular contributor. Dr. Kim, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks.
Now, we've heard reports that the local authorities have begun pumping oxygen into the cabin of the vessels. What are the chances of that being successful? I mean, what will that do for the possible survivors in there?
Right. Certainly, we have no idea about the successability here, but at least the meaning of doing so seems to be quite significant here because it has several utilities there, meaning not only just providing oxygen for the possible survivors inside, trapped inside the vessel itself, but also keeping the vessel itself floated as much as it can so that the amount of water inside the vessel itself will be minimized. So in both ways, it will make a much difference until we can actually lift the vessel itself out of the water, which might take a long time. In Cheonan's case, Cheonan's sinking back in 2010, it took us 17 days to lift the vessel out of the water. So this time, hopefully, accumulated experience will, accelerate the overall process as a whole. But the thing is, this vessel itself is about 6 times bigger than the vessel that we had to deal with in Cheonan case back in 2010. So who knows how much time we will need here, but every second the possible survivors will need the oxygen, and it's very important for us to keep the amount of water minimized inside the vessel. So it's a very important process that they're working on.
Well, another thing about this vessel, another question that has come up is whether it has met the safety standards and whether it went through the proper inspections before departing from Incheon. And of course, here in Korea, there has been a lot of talk about the lack of sense of safety amongst the people and the sentiment.
Right.
What's your view on that?
In terms of the safety procedure before its departure, because the vessel itself was not full, I think it's like a 900 people capacity, but it had only less than 500 people. So up to that point, probably there was nothing, at least in my own view at this point, there's nothing serious violation. But now, increasingly, we're hearing reports that possible redesigning of the vessel itself might have caused at least might have contributed to this accident, because looks like they have added the extra floor on top of the vessel when they imported this vessel from Japan and then set in commission last year. So if you increase the height of the vessel, of course it will increase the risk for losing the balance as a whole. So that kind of redesigning of the vessel itself might become later on a central key issue of a possible safety violation.
Right. Definitely investigation needs to be launched in that part, but for now, search and rescue operations is key, the focus of our search here. And as rescue efforts continue, we are learning of heartbreaking stories. Text messages from passengers who were on the sinking ferry have surfaced. A son thinking he might not make it, telling his mother that he loves her, and another student telling his father that he cannot escape because the ship has tilted too much. There are other rescue stories coming to light, including the rescue of a 6-year-old child. Our Connie Lee has more.
Text messages, apparently from passengers, paint a harrowing picture of what it was like in the moments directly after the ferry started sinking. One trapped passenger texted his father, telling him about a situation. To this, the father responded, "I know help is on the way, but if possible, get outside." To this, the son texts back, "No, Dad, I can't. The ferry is too tilted. There are no kids out in the hallways." Another passenger, this time a son, texted his mother, "Mom, just in case I don't have another chance to say it, I love you." The mother replied, but clearly unaware of his situation. An exchange between two brothers describes what had happened. The passenger texted that the ferry hit something and stopped moving, but reassured his older brother that a rescue team had arrived. The older brother then replied, telling him not to panic, to stay alert and follow directions, but he heard nothing more. Meanwhile, the stories of survivors show their desperate attempts to live, with some passengers breaking through windows and jumping into waters to be rescued.
I just jumped into the water and started swimming. It was really cold, so I tried to swim as fast as I could.
Stories of heroism are also surfacing, including one where 58-year-old Kim Hong-young saved 20 passengers by himself as a ferry was sinking. Kim reportedly tied a fire hose to curtains and pulled nearly 24 students from the first floor of the ship to the outside so that rescue helicopters could reach them. And another story of heroism is a rescue of a 6-year-old child. The young girl named Kwon Ji-yeon was rescued by 4 passengers, as you can see in this video, in the final moments. During the disaster, she was apparently split up from her parents and brother, who are unfortunately still among the hundreds who are still missing. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
You know, I could only imagine how what the parents and the family and the loved ones of those on board would feel like, the harrowing times that they must be going through. As a parent yourself, how would you feel? Yeah, absolutely. As a parent of 3 children, especially one in high school age, exactly those students that we were seeing on the screen here. Last night I was feeling terrible, just imagining what if my child was trapped inside that big vessel when the sun was setting. It just broke my heart, especially. So my heart goes out to those parents. Well, we will keep our fingers crossed, and you will, of course, join us again in our later newscast. Okay. The search for survivors in waters off Korea's southwestern coast continues, and joining us now is Michelle Park for a look at the conditions down near Jindo, where the ferry went down. Michelle, how is it looking right now?
Well, the rain has been coming down hard since this morning, and where the search and rescue operations continue in the sinking of the Seoul ferry. And we are also experiencing some thunder and fog later in the afternoon, and waves could also be an issue today. And they're expected to reach up to 2 meters in the area, with winds blowing at a speed of 7 to 12 meters per second. Now, these conditions are obviously hindering search and rescue efforts, and will continue to monitor the situation down near Jindo and just hope for the best. Now, the rain that started in the southern region this morning is expected to extend over the whole nation by the late afternoon. Now, going over to our temperature readings, Seoul tops out at 21 this afternoon. Meanwhile, the southern cities such as Gwangju and Busan will peak up to 18 and 21 degrees. Now, moving over to other regions, Jeju Island peaks over to 19, while Mangeung tops out at 10. Well, that's all for now. I'm Michelle Park, and back to you, Kanyang.
All right, thank you, Michelle, for that. That's all from me at this hour. Our special coverage on the sunken ferry off Korea's southwestern coast continues all throughout the day. Join me again at the top of the hour.